Welcome to Turek Books Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Joshua Turek. We're never going to read all the books we want, but when someone tells us about a book, that's its own valid form of experiencing it. Our guests come in to talk about the books that left lasting marks on them as readers, and that becomes a springboard to who they are, who I am, and maybe who all of us are. So sit back, relax, and enjoy it. And who knows, maybe you'll end up grabbing a book or two. Maybe you've read some of them, and it's nice to hear someone else talk about them. We want this to be like a book club, but without the guilt. Hey everyone, thank you for tuning into the Turek Books Podcast. I'm Joshua Turek, here with the guest I'm really excited to have today. His name is Evan Waite. He's a writer for Family Guy. He's also written his own book, which we're really excited to hear about. Evan, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Happy you're here. Right ahead of what they're calling potentially catastrophic storms in Los Angeles, which could mean a lot of different things historically.
I think people get really worried about that. I think that it's almost like they get excited about being worried about it.
Yes.
And so, let's see what actually happens, because I've been disappointed many times. They're talking about it's going to be crazy, and it's not.
And it's not. I just want it, it's like you want it to bring a safe level of drama, but you want some drama.
Yeah, cut to rest in peace, in memoriam sign on the podcast, because
yeah, exactly,
we're all dead by the time it comes out.
You want some drama are my last words. Yeah, and so as far as your relationship to books, are you a big reader? How do you classify yourself?
I would say I'm a pretty big reader. Yeah.
Yeah.
I read more when I was a kid. I think. From when I was a kid until like end of college, I was like plowing through lots and lots and lots of books.
Yeah.
But I still am into it, and I haunt book sales like almost every week.
Do you?
I do, yeah.
At libraries or bookstores or?
Yeah, at libraries.
Libraries.
Yeah, it's sort of weird. I don't know.
No, it's not.
It's not weird, but when I go, especially in New York, when I would go, the other people that were there made me feel like, is this what I am? There'd be a lot of people who hadn't showered, and people who look kind of rumpled and dandruffy, and
you're just describing me. Yeah, go on.
But you're getting all these books for $1.50 or something. You can't beat it. So
no, I've been so disappointed because the Goodwill, the books are now like $6 or $7,
mm-hmm.
and these are like Idiot's Guide to Carpentry or whatever, which. That's a useful skill, but it's just like this shouldn't be what used books cost. The libraries, the book carts are still $1 at most of them,
mm-hmm.
Which, I respect. To me, hunting for used books is like the great treasure hunt in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel an outsized amount of wealth acquiring a book that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
In comparison to $1. I think it's like the best value in our society.
It definitely is. I think that, for the amount of enjoyment you get out of it, and for like $1, it's essentially free.
Essentially free. Yeah. I don't even want the $1.
Yeah.
It's weighing down my pockets more than
I feel bad when they like give you change. I'm like, you know what? Just keep it. It's like a 25-cent book, and they're like, we got to get you your 75 cents back. I'm like, we're good.
Stop.
It's okay.
Do you have any familiar haunts you'd be willing to divulge, or are these top secret spots?
Well, anybody who cares enough can find them, but it's basically I just go on the LA library website, and you just see like which places are having sales that week, and
nice.
If the timing works out.
nice.
Usually like every Saturday there's like at least like 3 of them in different libraries around the city. So
like a full-on weekend sale.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so smart, because I just hit up the carts.
Mm-hmm.
But okay,
that's you got to go full in, man.
Full in.
Yeah.
I've been to a weekend sale at the Beverly Hills Library, and
mm-hmm.
that one was memorably good, which isn't part of the LAPL, the LA Public Library System. I have a goal right now of visiting all 73 locations of the LA Public Library.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How far along are you?
Well, I've done 8.
Okay.
I think in my real life I've been to probably like 20, 25, but I'm making a video series. And then I haven't told anyone this, but then at the end of all 73, I'm going to upload it on YouTube as one long, torturous video.
Okay.
And maybe one day it'll be like
How long are we talking here?
Well, each video is like 3 minutes. So, yeah, it'll be a feature film.
Hardcore, man.
Yeah, I know. I know. I'm already, and I'm like, oh, I hope no one steals my idea. And I'm like, no one wants your idea. You're all right. So anyway, you brought a few books for us to talk about. I'm really excited to dig in and hear what's on your mind, what you're reading, what you're excited to talk about and get off your shelf.
Well, this first book is called The Works, Anatomy of a City, and it's by Kate Ascher. And this is a book I found when I was living in New York, and it's basically, it just talks about the infrastructure of New York, like how New York is built, like what are the sewer systems and how the mail is done and how the tunnels are built. And it has just a ton of graphics, and it's just like, it's so interesting. Like every page is just like packed with like interesting facts about the city. And because I think when you live in a city, you don't really think about how it's built or how it runs. But it's just like a marvel of like engineering.
Yeah, there's thought gets put into everything that we just take for granted or encounter simply because we can't walk through a city and think about everything, or we just never get through the city.
It would be very overwhelming.
We'd be overwhelmed.
But it sort of like breaks it down like section by section.
Yeah.
And like one thing I really like is like the graphics are very interesting, and it's like every page is like packed with things to look at. Like even if you were just looking at it and you weren't even reading it, it's still interesting.
Yeah, these are like hyper realistic illustrations. Is that kind of the vibe that I'm seeing?
Yeah.
And it looks like you use Post-its to mark favorite pages.
Well, I was, I hadn't read it in a while, so knowing that I was coming on here, I was like, all right, let me just like look through this again.
Oh, nice.
And I was just like highlighting some of like the facts that just stuck out as I was like looking through it.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So you did that for us.
Yeah.
We're honored.
I'll see if I can find something.
Yeah. What do you got here? Because I've recently started using index cards to mark spots in books that I want to go back to in a very similar fashion. Post-its probably make more sense because they stick.
Yeah. Like this is, when they have an aqueduct, and when they're searching for leaks, it says, to better understand the nature of leaks emanating from the Delaware Aqueduct, a tunnel inspection company teamed up with Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute to design a specialized torpedo-shaped robot that can maneuver through the aqueduct's pipes and record their condition. I was like, that's really interesting.
That's really interesting.
So it's like they just send this robot
submersible
through that can sort of search for leaks and cracks in the aqueduct. Like,
an aqueduct is like a waterway. Is it what is it like feed for us exactly? Is it our drinking water? Is it a sewer water?
I think it is for drinking water.
Yeah. I once was a plumber's assistant, and we had like you'd send a snake down into through the pipes, and at the end of the snake was a camera.
Really?
So, yeah. So similarly, you would see some pretty horrific sights through that camera.
Well, this is another one that we're talking about, like why in New York why the radiators clang.
Yeah.
If you're ever, the radiators make this weird clanging sound. I was like, I didn't think about it. Who would think about that? But
I always thought it was like the big rats with hammers just smacking on the.
No, apparently it's drops of water.
Okay.
And it says that when the water drops are known as a traveling slug, and they can travel as fast because they're being pushed through with steam.
Okay.
So it's just these like droplets are like clanging along the pipes when it has to turn the pipes.
Right.
Like because the pipes, they're not all straight, so that they have like the elbow turns, and it's just water droplets like banging off of it.
Whoa! At high speeds?
Yeah.
Or just interesting.
Yeah, it turns into almost like a little bullet or something, just like a.
Whoa.
And I was like, damn, that is like so interesting to me.
Yeah, it seems like I've never lived in New York, but it seems like it is a city that kind of moans and groans and speaks to you through all of its like materials.
Yeah, it's a wild city. Like when you actually stop and look at it and think about like how this was actually put together, it's just like remarkable.
Right.
And this book sort of just breaks down, layer by layer, like how that happens. And I was like, this is like one of the coolest books I've ever seen, I think.
It sounds amazing. Do you remember how you found it?
I think I found it at a book sale, actually.
No kidding.
Just like, flipping through it, I was like immediately the graphics of it seemed very interesting. And, in regards to my book, actually, this is one of the models that I was talking to the graphics person about.
Oh, really?
Because I was like, just the way the illustrations are integrated with the text is really interesting. And I was like, I want to mimic that style where they all like, because they sort of feed off each other.
Right.
It's like one of them, the graphics and the illustrations, each one makes the other one more interesting.
Yeah, exactly right.
You know? So
yeah, we had Chris Estrada on the podcast, and he brought in a few different graphic novels, which I've never like delved into. And yeah, he was saying like, you know, you think of like children's books with pictures and it's going to be easier, but it's like actually each page takes you longer to read because you're like absorbing those illustrations and taking in those images, and they're telling their stories, and it's like, yeah, there's something really even more rich having those pictures involved.
Well, different people, like, they read graphic novels in different ways too. Like some people just sort of like linger on the pictures, and some people just sort of zip through the text to see what's going on. Like, you know, you can do it in all different ways, and you could stare at one page for like 10 minutes if you wanted to, and just look at every little detail. Or if you just want to get the story quickly through, you can. And sometimes you might read it more than once, and you read it in different ways each time.
You read it different ways. You do like, hey, I'm just going to do a text read and see how that feels. Or I'm just going to do a video. Wow, okay.
Mm-hmm. I did a reread of WATCHMEN maybe a couple months ago. And I was like slowing down and looking at the illustrations a little more carefully. And it's like the level of detail is just ridiculous.
Whoa.
So it's like it rewards that.
It rewards that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can see, I'm trying to remember his name, the guy who plays Rorschach. I'm trying to remember his name. You know, there's a character I think it's like the first panel of the book is the character who then becomes like Rorschach is there. And I didn't even notice that the first time. It's just a guy holding a sign.
No kidding.
And then you look at it later, you're like, oh, that's him from the, you know, who later becomes this major character in the story.
What a great example with that, with the Watchmen. And I mean, it kind of just makes me want to talk about the book that you wrote. Because it sounds like you used illustrations to accompany your subject matter as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, one thing I'll show you is the thing that was graphically took the longest to do is we did this subway map that we have at the
and this is titled "Life Wants You Dead." Yeah.
So see, this is this took probably 9 months to make or so.
Whoa! It comes with each book?
Yeah, this is like a sort of a poster that comes in the back of each one.
Can I take a look at it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so what I'm seeing is the subconscious way system, and it's a subway map, but of a human like skeleton, like a human skull, and the map is within the brain, or where the brain would be. Yeah.
So essentially, this is an idea that I was thinking about because the entire book is about fear, and so I thought, oh, the subway system. I've always seen the iconic subway poster in New York when you ride the subway, and I thought, like, that'd be kind of interesting. It's like the pathways of your neuroses and your fears and stresses. I thought that would be kind of interesting, but like the logic of it really took a lot longer to figure out than I thought, because you realize that everything has to interact. Like, for instance, subway stops that are on like multiple lines, it has to be like a joke that is, fear and also wants, for instance. So it has to be a joke that like encompasses both of those two things. And it just took a while to figure out. I mean, it took probably about 8 rounds to just get it right.
Yeah, so you actually interconnected it. It wasn't just going for the joke or going for what came to your mind. I mean, so each subconscious way system, each subway line is an emotion line. The red line is anger. The green line is want. Even the thought of color coding those emotions is step one and works great. And then so we're on the anger subconscious way line, and it's one stop is hatred of people taller than you, and then the next stop
which I
is
despise you for that, by the way, and you.
Well, we live shorter lives. That's the only. Whatever. But then the very next stop after hatred of people taller than you is pity for people shorter than you. Being last one still chanting fight, shushing bigger man, being played off by orchestra. This is amazing. Yeah, and so you say this took you 9 months? I believe it.
Yeah, it did take a while because the more we were getting into it, the more the logic of it would start to bump and be like, oh, well, that doesn't make sense. And then you got to like try to figure out how to incorporate that. And then also just like writing a million jokes to try to like make sure you feel really good about every one of them. I probably wrote like 10 times the amount of jokes that ended up in it.
Yeah.
But I was like, will any other book company ever like let me do this again? maybe, I don't know. So I was like, you got to go all in when you get the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I've never been. I think this is such a creative supplement to a book. Do you have a stop on the subconscious way system that you think you would go to the most? Like, where's your home? Where's your home stop on this system if you have one?
I think probably anger over offensive tweet and then knowledge you said worse. Those are two stops adjacent to each other.
Anger over offensive tweet and then knowledge that you've said worse.
Well, it just sort of encompasses that idea that, you know, everybody's like shining a light on what everybody else is doing. You know, like you said that and that's wrong. And this is, you know, and not just for tweeting, but like just in general.
Right.
And then you look at yourself and you go, hey.
The thoughts I had on the way over here would get me canceled 3 times over.
Yeah. So I don't know. As I get older, I have less, I don't get as worked up about that kind of stuff. Yeah. Because I'm just like, you know, everybody's just trying to figure it out.
I'm wondering if that was like a certain phase, a reaction to a time period, a correction. But it seems like a lot of people are heading in that direction as far as how we're taking in the media, the social media landscape. Everyone kind of like having a reckoning of the sort of witch huntery of it all.
Some are still
on
the hunt.
Pitchforks raised. Yeah. And you know, it's just, I guess
because a lot of times it just feels like it's kind of in bad faith is
bad faith.
Yeah. That's it's like, right. Yes, what they said was bad, but also why are you doing that?
Right.
What's your sort of motivations? And is this like because you legitimately just are upset, or is it because you're sort of wanting to use this to like leapfrog them and sort of get some clout for yourself? And so, you know, it's complicated because sometimes there are terrible things that legitimately should be called out, and there's nothing wrong with that. But like, nobody is pure in this system, I think.
Yeah, that's right. In the attention economy, like that, the medium is the message, and it's like if you're participating in this medium of attention economy, or the catch-all of it, it's like, you are it as well.
Yeah. I know that makes us sound like 1,000 years old. I was like, well, this is what it is, so whatever. But, you know, I've thought about, I remember the time when I really took a step back from the whole thing was, remember around when the Jussie Smollett stuff was happening. And so I was like, oh my God, look at this terrible thing happened. I had barely read it. I just sort of saw a headline and go, that seems terrible. And then I tweeted something about it. And then, you know, a couple weeks later, it started to seem like maybe it wasn't really, you know, legit.
Right.
And then I'm like, okay, do I have to now print a retraction? Like a retraction tweet? I guess I do.
Yeah.
And it just was like, this is sickening to me because I don't even, it's like I'm doing a retraction to an empty room because I don't even have that many followers. I just felt like a huge dick. And I'm like, all right, I'm done with this. And that's when I kind of took a step back. Yeah. And, you know, obviously to promote the book, I am on there a little bit more than I would have been otherwise. But like, I'd rather just cancel it all together, but there's like 10% of it that's actually useful to me.
Right.
And like 90% of shit that I really don't want to deal with.
Yeah, it seems like self-promotion is inescapable at this point if you're trying to put things out into the world.
Working hard on something and you want people to see it, then that's a medium to get it to people. And also, you know, it's a way to end up talking to people that you might want to, you know, have a meeting with or get in touch with, and it gives you a chance to have a channel to get to them.
That's right.
You know?
That's right.
So there are a few things, just enough to make me not just close it up altogether.
I know. I think we're all on the same page with social media. It's like just when you're about to give up on it, you go get coffee with someone you've known on Twitter for 10 years, and you're like, wouldn't have met you without Twitter. Damn it.
Yeah.
Can't totally discard it.
But the percentages of how good it is dropping very quickly.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, no, I mean, Twitter's a kind of a bad example because it really does feel like a graveyard on there. Kind of in a fascinating way, but not fascinating enough that you shouldn't just be living a normal life.
Yeah, but I've sort of made a pledge to myself that like I'm not joining any new social media.
There we go.
There's no more new ones coming out.
There we go.
Bike. I'm done.
Yeah, the line has been drawn.
Yeah.
And if something catches fire, let it burn without me.
It's fine. Be all right.
Yeah. Good call. And so, okay, so we got into this subconscious way system map. The book itself, Life Wants You Dead.
Mm-hmm.
Great title. Talk to me about it a little bit. Where did it come from? What's the genesis of this with you?
Well, I'd say this is definitely like pandemic inspired,
Okay.
where I just felt like everybody's relationship to fear was changing very quickly. Mine was. I've always felt like I was a pretty relaxed person who wasn't that stressed about these things. And then when the pandemic hit, I'm running through grocery stores like I'm in a bank heist, grabbing stuff and holding my breath on elevators. And I'm like, this is a shift, and it just felt like a shift that was not just me, like everybody's, in the span of like a few months, everybody's relationship to fear had completely changed for the worse. And so when I was thinking about doing a book, I just thought, okay, starting from an emotional core seemed like the way to go for me. I thought, okay, like what's the emotion that's seems to be in the air right now? And it was so clearly it was fear. And so, okay, that's where I started. I got fear. And then I was trying to figure out what's a good container for it. So I went to Barnes & Noble one day, and I was just kind of walking around, seeing the different types of books. And I came across a survival guide. And I was flipping through it, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, because already it was super heightened. I mean, I was reading the survival guide, and the people were already saying, like, when shit goes down. It wasn't like if the world burns. It's like when it does. These are the things you're going to have to do. And I was like, that's an interesting conceit that already they've conceded that the world is shit and it's going to burn and everybody's screwed. That's like the baseline. And then from there, it's like, what are we going to do about it to defend ourselves against it? And I just thought, like, what if you put that conceit in the hands of a narrator who really just doesn't understand the world very much? Like, that seemed like a funny juxtaposition. It's just like a guy who just thinks every single thing is a threat. Like the second you step out of your house, that was just like the dumbest thing you could do is interact with the world in any way, because then you're screwed. So I thought, oh, that's funny. I mean, it seems so heightened, and you could talk about anything, because when somebody doesn't, you're not bound to the facts. It's just like emotionally you can swerve all over the place.
Right. And so this is written in the voice of that character.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, the different chapters are like, for instance, like love. Like love is a stupid, dangerous thing. You're opening yourself up to somebody. That's dangerous. Even being in your house, that's a stupid place to be, because, there's doors, people can walk in them and kill you. There's windows. I mean, it's just everything is a threatening situation.
Yeah. And then the body, I mean, forget
yes.
it. Why are we in these?
Yeah. I mean, the body is like your enemy, but you're inside of it. So it's like the most dangerous situation you can be in.
Yeah, and so the idea behind exposing fear toward everything is almost an opportunity to kind of liberate yourself from it, because you kind of go, okay, well, now that I've acknowledged the worst of everything around me, there's still a part of me that wants to encounter it. So what does that actually mean? Is that kind of the response that comes?
Yeah, it's sort of, that's sort of where the book lands is, things are crazy right now, and, we're all trying to do the best we can. And, in the narrator's world, he sees that people are still good in certain ways, and that's bad. Like in his way, it's bad, but like in the message of the book, it's like, still you shouldn't disengage from the entire world. Like that's actually a bad thing to do.
Right.
So and it kind of is some layers.
It's bad for him because it's disproving his hypothesis.
Right.
Right.
He's like, things are going great because like everything is burning, but like yet people are still fighting back against it, and that's a bad thing.
Right.
So you're sort of trying to get your message out, because you don't want to leave the book on a complete downer, like everything is a mess, and
right.
This is like that's not a very hopeful place to land.
No, you're kind of disproving your main character through anecdotes and things like that.
Yeah.
Like you're talking about.
That's kind of the idea, yeah. And, I didn't know that that's where it would land when you start. You're just packing it with jokes and stuff. But then at the end, you're like, okay, you want to have a conclusion that feels like emotionally satisfying, I think.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, the thing hearing you talk about this, and I've been afraid longer than the pandemic. So you're like, I'm close to the main character. I remember reading, How to Survive books, decades ago. I'm in my early 20s. I'm as strong as I've ever been, and I'm reading this book on people who've survived deadly crashes, what they've done to survive. And I remember one note was like, on the life raft, the optimist is always the first one to die.
Jesus.
Yeah.
It's dark.
Okay. And it was something to the effect of like, because they think help is right around the corner, they are that much more deflated when it doesn't show up.
Okay.
And so it's like almost a wasted energy, which I thought was interesting. The only other detail from that book that stuck with me is how most people survive plane crashes. It's actually not the impact of the crash that kills most people. It's how they respond once the crash has happened. and that you should always keep your shoes on a flight.
Okay.
Yeah, because knowing where those exits are actually turns out to be pretty important, and getting
Okay.
off before the plane burns or sinks is kind of the name of the game.
I mean,
So-
also it's just repulsive when somebody next to you on a plane has their shoes off.
Has their shoes off,
Yeah,
right?
Just on a base level, you should probably not do that anyway.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
I don't want to see feet.
Yeah, not on a plane.
Mm.
Wait till you get to the sandy vacation to let loose. And so, okay, so you started this was spawned by the pandemic.
Yeah, I would say so.
And so it took you how long to write the book?
I mean, the proposal took about 6 months or so. I mean, I wrote the first burst of it. I wrote it, in about a month and a half. And then, I got hooked up with a book agent, and we were working on that. And then we just were tightening it up for a couple of months.
Yeah.
And so, then, so I did that. I started it in December 2020. And then sold the book, I think, around June of 2021. And then started working on it from there.
Was it a rewarding experience compared to some of the other writing you've done, or how does it differ? Because you've done primarily screenwriting, is that right?
I mean, I've done some prose stuff too. I mean,
You
I
have?
started, my first comedy writing thing was at The Onion.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that was like where I got going. So I was on the prose side far before
Got it.
TV ever got into the picture.
Okay, so this brought you back to prose.
Oh yeah.
Or I mean, maybe you never left prose, it sounds
No,
like.
I haven't left it, but I for me, that's the most satisfying version of comedy.
Yeah,
I like that the best, and I feel like I understand it the
yeah.
TV, I'm still learning how to do it. I'm in it, but I'm still, it's a completely different kind of a thing.
Right.
And but prose is a good sweet spot for me. That's where I like to be. And but yeah, it definitely was very, very satisfying. It's the most fun project I've ever done. I mean,
Really?
by a large margin.
Really?
I think because these were things I was thinking about so much that it just was like it all sort of poured out, and it was very fun. And I think what I realized later was that I thought it was that the pandemic spurred on all this fear, but then what I realized is it was always there, just sort of latently there, and then it just took the right set of circumstances to sort of.
The pandemic was fear affirming. It
Yeah,
got you.
it was
in touch with
if you ever see those pimple popper videos online,
Yeah.
it's just it's all gunked up there, and then the pandemic was boop.
Boom.
Yeah.
And it all came pouring out.
Mm-hmm.
Were you living in LA when that happened, or were you still in New York?
I was in LA.
Oh, you were in LA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a not great apartment. I was there in a place that I was planning to just be a temporary place, and
Yeah.
then the pandemic kind of locked me in there. It was essentially a converted garage.
Okay.
It was like a guest house that was thinly veiled garage.
Right.
Yeah, with terrible
Glorified
furniture.
garage.
Yeah. The desk was a plank on 2 hobby horses. And,
Okay.
terrible chair, and it was just not a great place to be.
I'm with you. We had to move that March, and we moved into this place in Glendale, which is northeast LA. If people aren't familiar, right at the edge. You're just hanging on to LA for dear life. No, it's got a lot of cool stuff, but I was spending all my time at the Forest Lawn Cemetery, and I was like, okay, this is how you know you need to leave a place when your favorite part of it is the cemetery.
Yeah, it's oh man, I can't wait to be under that dirt. That's gonna be amazing.
Yeah, that's right.
It seems so calm and peaceful under that.
But we moved in to a new spot, and it had bed bugs.
Oh,
So in the first month of the pandemic, we had bed bugs. My girlfriend, I was like, hey, you should maybe go drive to your dad's up north. I'll take care of the bed bugs. So I'm going into the laundromat with bags full of everything we own.
that's the guy everybody wants to see. The guy who shows up with the bed bugs, bed bug bags in the.
That's right. And no one knew what was contagious, what wasn't. So I'm in this public space, and they're telling you not to wear masks, and who knows. And then, after the bed bug scenario and the rats that were running on the ceilings, there were these little girls in the backyard over the fence from us whose parents put them out every day, and they would just shriek and scream all day. And
They're going through it too, I'm sure.
Going through it too.
Everybody's.
And just the shrieks of these girls haunted me. And we tried to investigate what was going on, but yeah, it was the pandemic. It was a very weird time.
Yeah. The one thing, that I was very cognizant of is that nobody wants to read about specifically the pandemic.
No.
Or watch shows that are like, hey, this is our pandemic episode.
That's right.
It's just instantly repulsive.
That's right.
To me,
Repulsive.
Anyway. I don't want to see that.
All the behavior was cringe. All the feelings were, it was an aberration.
Yeah.
Let's not make sense of it. Let's skip this one, right?
Yeah, it's like, I think we all have to sort of address the emotional like subtext of it. But
no, let's just
just
repress
fuck
it. Yeah, I mean, maybe the people who are young, but I'm going to repress this one.
All right, hold on to that.
Yeah, I'm skipping over this trauma.
Emotional coiled spring. That's great.
Just a bundle of rage, and it's spurting out of me at all the worst times in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
well,
like, you know, COVID is never actually mentioned in the book. It's just sort of the emotional stuff that is around it.
Yeah.
Is sort of, because I didn't want it to be like sort of a relic.
Right.
Because that's kind of a drag. Like you see something, and you know, I was very careful to try to keep the topical sort of references to a minimum.
Yeah.
I want to talk about like primal things.
Yeah, primal
To me,
things.
that's what's interesting.
Yeah, the pandemic was just a launching point to discussing the format of life that we're all familiar with, that we encounter in our environment with our failing bodies every single day.
Yeah. I don't know if you ever have read Jack Handy, who's
I remember the SNL guy, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he does he does a lot of New Yorker pieces, and he has a book called The Stench of Honolulu, which is great.
Yeah.
But like his theory is that like you just want to keep topical stuff out of it altogether, because that's what gives it it makes it last.
Right. Keep it timeless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just talking about like, you know, the election or, you know, things that are so tied to a specific time. It just takes you right out of it if you read it like 5 years later.
It really does. It, like people, you'll be reading something about Reagan and you're just like, no, I vaguely understand he was really however you want to feel about him, but it's not landing with me. Yeah.
It's a Hunter S. Thompson book about like the Nixon election, like going through the election campaign trail. It's like, it's interesting, but it also doesn't really resonate in many ways because he's talking about a bunch of figures I don't really know or care that much about.
Right.
Whereas like a book like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is just like straight up like a story that it's not tied to anything like that.
Yeah, doing drugs and going to Las Vegas are timeless.
Yeah. So, you know, because I took a pass at the end of the book. I was like, all right, let's like look for these types of references and just try to keep it to a minimum.
That's cool.
You know? That
makes a lot of sense. Walking through the book a little bit, was there any subject matter that was like a little jarring for you? Was it all jarring for you, confronting it, or was it more cathartic? Especially because it sounds like you're making humor out of a lot of it.
I would say probably like the chapter on love was probably the trickiest one.
No kidding.
I mean, I was going through a divorce like in the pandemic also.
Okay.
So that was like it was just a weird stew of things going on. So the love chapter, I would look back at it and I go, oh man, this is a guy who is not in the best place at that moment.
You were probably right in line with your main character for that.
Yeah.
One. Yeah.
I think so.
Like, let's go off.
Yeah.
Let's do
it's like,
this.
For the record, I'm not like anti-love. Like that's a really stupid sort of conceit, but like it was just this idea of vulnerability is, you know, when you're going through stuff like that, it's just sort of throws you off. And I'm just now sort of getting my like legs under me, like from that experience.
Yeah.
So it was just like a bundle of terrible things happening all at once.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, just like a big old meeting point for you in your life.
Yeah.
You're over there in the garage.
Yeah.
You're like you're a mechanic of yourself at that point.
Yeah. Just like this is just a mess. I'm looking around at my life thinking, okay, I'm sitting on a chair that like I'm just like it's like cracking my back, and my desk is sort of like dipping in the middle. I'm like, this is not the best situation.
Yeah.
So.
And yeah, you found creativity, you found inspiration from it.
Yeah, I think that's why, you know, it sort of was flowing very easily, because it was just like a lot of things that like I wanted to say and things that were on my mind, and then all of a sudden, you know, you get a container to pour all that in and make it funny and just make it like lighthearted. You know, it's like, yeah, these are dark things, but it's just like you can approach it in a way that's funny and interesting and isn't like a drag.
Yeah, that's where the relief is. I just got my first cameo request. I forgot I was on there.
Really?
I've been on there for 2 years. No one's ever requested.
What are you charging?
I was charging $30.
Okay. I don't know what's the rates on that.
Yeah, I don't either. I thought I would put it high so that no one would request, But anyway, the request I got was this man who wanted it for his wife's anniversary. He said she just got laid off from her job, and she also wants to be a comedy writer. And I was like, perfect. Those two go together great. Yeah. And so I tried to let her know, like, hey, this is the soil for comedy. I mean, you know, it's not anything revolutionary to say, but yeah, I mean, to transmute the pain into humor and stuff is, like, I think one of the better acts of people are capable of.
Yeah, and I think those are the things that make a piece of work connect with other people.
Right.
Because what you realize is, like, you're not the only one going through this stuff. Like, it's all very common life experiences, but then if you get to talk about them, other people will, like, latch onto it. And then it's like, it makes the humor hit so much harder. That's what I realized. Like, this was the first sort of thing I approached like this. And what I realized is, like, it just hits way harder. The jokes, because it's connected to something you actually care about and are thinking about.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when I was thinking about books to do, I was kicking around a bunch of different ideas. And, like, they were, like, funny ideas that I was like, I could see that being a funny book. But it's like, who cares? Like, what is it about? Like, why does anybody care about this? You know, and if you have an emotional connection to it, it makes it, like, exponentially more interesting and funny, I think.
Yeah, and it's really cool that you're thinking, and who's going to care about it 20 years from now, too?
Yeah.
Or could potentially, right?
Yeah. Because, you know, part of it is what I realize is if you sell a book that you actually don't care about, it's like you're in trouble because you have to write this thing and you're not connected to it. And it's just like, it's not flowing. It's just going to be kind of lame. And people can feel, like, you can feel when somebody is writing something they're having fun with. It's like they enjoyed. It's just like, it's very, very clear to me anyway.
It's actually something I'm always jealous of when a friend sends me their first script. They're like, hey, I finally wrote a script. Will you read it? I'm like, yeah, sure. And, you know, the writing, it's like everyone grows as writers, whatever. But, like, the thing I can't escape often is the enthusiasm for their own ideas that kind of bounce off the page. Right. And I think that's, like, the greatest strength, like, for people who are just setting out to write is, like, they are excited by their ideas. Yeah. And then finding it as someone who's been writing a long time seems to be, like, its own sort of craft, or at least its own form of honesty with yourself. Yeah, it sounds
I think
like.
It's sort of infectious. Like, when I read something that I know that that person was really enjoying themselves, like, you already, like, start to enjoy it just because they are. Like, it's the same way with lots of, you know, when you go to a concert and the band is really into what they're doing and you get into it. It's just like, it's just a communal raising of the energy. Yes. And, you know, when you find an idea like that, then you're really in a nice place. And I happened to come across, like, an idea that really worked for that. And, you know, now I'm sort of trying to think about if I want to do another one, and I'm trying to find that thing that I care about enough to do. You know, I've had some ideas that I'm like, this could be really funny, but, like, now I'm thinking about the emotional side of it.
Right.
And
right.
Like, if I'm not feeling that part, I sort of feel like I'm setting myself up for problems potentially.
Yeah, because it's like any relationship. You're like, can I have a relationship with this for a few years? You know, like.
Yeah. And now I know the amount of energy it requires to do it. Right. Like, I didn't know that when I sold this one.
This is your first book?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had no idea. And now, like, going through it, I'll be like, oh, if I actually didn't care about this, you'd be like 3 months in and you would be in a really bad place. Yeah. Knowing that it's just, like, not that great. And,
yeah, you moved in with someone a little too quick.
Right.
Then, yeah. So Life Wants You Dead. The sequel could be Death Wants You Alive, right? And it's like, hey, you're not actually good enough. You need to work on yourself first.
Well, I've thought about a sequel to this, and I had a few ideas. But one thing I'm struggling with is I feel like sequels to these types of books are never quite as good as the first one.
Right.
Like, if you ever read the Daily Show book, America?
No, I never have. I've seen it all over the place.
Oh, it's amazing. It's just, like, one of the best comedy books of all time.
Wow.
It's just like, it's like basically a history or a textbook about America.
It has Jon Stewart on the cover. I can see it, right?
He's sitting at his desk. Grab that. It's amazing.
Okay.
But they put out a second book. It was called Earth, and it was like, I think the conceit was like aliens are coming from Earth and they need, like, a book to understand the inner workings of, like, the human world. Right. And it was like, it was super funny because it has amazing jokes and some of the best writers of all time are on it. But I always felt like it was sort of made because the first one was good. Right. And they're like, what else you got? And they're like, it feels like the conception was a little bit.
They didn't need to do it like they did the first one.
Yeah. Like, the first one is the pure idea. And the second one is like, hey, the marketplace has decided that we would like another one of these. So what do you got?
Right. Thinking about how you finishing the book and thinking of your next projects, after seeing your book out, like it's sitting on the table in front of us, it's published, like has your relationship to it changed?
Yeah, I mean, it's only deepened, honestly. I mean, because for me, I like physical copies of things. I don't care about being on a PDF scrolling through on a phone, or, you know, I don't like that form of books, because it's just like, I like the relationship to it. I like to touch it and write on it and fold pages. And so to actually see it, you know, the real version of it, I was just over the moon with it. I'm so happy with how it came out, and just like the level of like production on it, I think is really strong. And, you know, I got with this company called Chronicle, who's the publisher, and they're just their books are beautiful. Like, they're just gorgeous books. And so I felt like so happy that I locked in with these guys, because they care about that as much as I do.
That's so cool. That's so cool to hear that like a dream come true feels that way.
Oh, I'm so excited for it to come out. I mean, it's been sitting on this for so long. There's so much like pent up energy around it.
Oh, when does it come out?
April 16th.
No kidding.
Yeah,
okay,
so it's about almost 2 months away, a little more, 2.5 months.
Okay. Oh, so that's amazing.
Like right on the edge of the diving board, and I'm just like, because I'm very proud of it. So
that's so cool to hear. That's inspiring to hear. And you know, talking about the physical relationship to books, I'm always carrying too many books with me, and I just sold my car, and I'm like, I just want to ride public transportation for a while, and I've had to be a little stingier with the books I'm carrying around now, because I'm carrying them.
Yes.
I'm not throwing them in my trunk. So it's like, I like the physical relationship to carrying a book. I have to have a different value or reason toward that book than I did when I was just tossing them into my back seat and, you know, piling them up, piling them high. And it's so interesting how the physical nature of a book, even the weight of it.
See, the weight of it, I find, is a problem sometimes.
Right.
And this is something I do sometimes. And I'm curious to see what you think about this, because some people really hate it. But sometimes when I have like a huge hardback book, I'll like cut it into sections.
Whoa.
And then, because like I remember the first one I did that with was this one of the Game of Thrones books. It was like one of the later ones that's ridiculously long, and it's a hardback, and it's like, it's so heavy that I wanted to read it on the subway, but I couldn't read it because I was like, I can't even hold this thing up. You know, it's just like so heavy and dense and huge.
Yeah.
So I sort of like cut it into sections so that I could just take that, like the first like 300 or 400 pages and read it. And I remember I took that into work one day, and they were like, what the fuck is this? Like, what did you do to that book? You mutilated it. And I felt like a monster all of a sudden. I'm like, I'm so sorry. But then I was like, well, I'm not going to read it in the form that it is.
Yeah.
I wouldn't read it because it's just too big, and I can't, it's unwieldy.
I've never heard of this. So what did you use, like industrial scissors to do this?
No, the way they did it, I feel like a surgeon. Like you had to cut the cover off. So I had like an X-Acto knife, and I like sort of stripped that off.
Oh wow!
And then when you flip it to the spine, and you then you take the X-Acto knife down the spine.
Okay.
And you cut it, and then you sort of tape each section together.
See, so this really makes me feel like a book is a body right now, and like you were performing surgery on this book.
I do wonder how I'd feel if somebody cut up my book. Like I think I would be like, I think I'm fine with it. I don't know.
Well, that's what goes through my mind with like. Talking about used book sales, every used book sale I've ever been to has a Jonathan Franzen Freedom or Corrections copy. And it's like, it's only because he was a bestseller that his books are always on the donation cart. Yeah. But psychologically, it's taken a toll on me. So I got to think, as a writer, it's like you're almost a victim of your own success. Not to say that books shouldn't recirculate, but just something about seeing it on your book on the dollar cart over and over and over again.
Yeah, is that a statement about the quality? Or
is
it just
even though it's not, but like, it's just always there. You're like, damn, another unloved copy of my book. Damn. But
it's just a bunch of people were looking at 5 pages and going, this is terrible.
I know. Well, there's the insecurity that I think I perceive it with. I'm like, oh, great, another person got rid of my book. Wait, I'm not even Jonathan Franzen. Why? But what do I think about you cutting up the books? I get it. I don't think there's any wrong approach to carrying a book. Cam and Pete, who are off camera, they've gotten into Kindles, and they have these very persuasive takes on it about how You get the library app, and you could pretty much read any book on this. You're addicted to. I'm gonna let them talk about it more one day, but they've definitely swayed me a little bit.
I mean, I can definitely understand the value of that. Like if you can carry like 1,000 books in a little tablet, that makes sense.
And being addicted to our phones. This is coming straight from Cam and Peter.
Yeah.
Follow them at content.creation.
Part of it though is that for my job there's so much screen time.
Well, exactly. And so instead of being on the phone, you're on the Kindle.
Yeah,
That's
so I'm not
Cam
looking to
Peter's
increase
point.
that. Yeah. Maybe if I didn't have a job like that, maybe I wouldn't care as much. But like when I'm on a screen all day.
Well, so then the question is it the screen itself, or is it the nature of the content we're taking in on the screen? That's the only debate point.
It feels almost like it cheapens it a little bit. It's almost like it fuses it when you go online, you're just reading some, article on Salon, or there's something that's like slapped together.
Right.
And then you're looking at a book that's on the same screen and it's the same type of words. It sort of flattens them as if they're the same.
Well, so it's like, okay, let's say you had a published print book version of your Instagram feed.
Right.
Like someone's like, I'm going to print out your Instagram feed right now and make a hardcover book of it right now. Would it change how you feel about it as you're reading the book?
I think it probably would.
Dang.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
It's like you have an Instagram feed and then you have like Moby Dick or something, and they're both on the same screen and it's just a bunch of words. So it's like it almost makes them, I think it sort of degrades the book.
The medium is the message.
I think so.
Yeah. And like the act of printing and then the physical reality of something, it like creates a capsule, a time capsule of when it was printed. And yeah, it does change it.
I think so. But, like my mom, she has a Kindle and she takes it around, and, she's an older woman. She doesn't want to haul around a bag of books every time she travels.
Yeah.
And it totally makes sense. And I there's no judgment of anybody who's using it. It's just like, it's just not for me.
Yeah, it's not for you. Yeah, it hasn't been for me either. I stick old school. I'm still thinking about you cutting up the book. Because here's what I want to say is I don't love hardcover books.
I don't either.
Okay.
I mean, I don't mind. It's the big ones, like a big hardcover novel. Like if it's just like a slim sort of hardback, that's cool.
Yeah.
But when it's just this big, it's just like heavy and it's hard to read.
It's hard to read. Yeah.
You have to prop it up on something. But when you're on the subway holding a book that's like 2 pounds, it's just like it messes up the reading experience for me.
I agree. I want a little bit of give in my backpack. I want a little bit of give in my hand when I'm reading it.
I like folding the cover back. And
folding the cover back.
Yeah, plus, I really do not like book jackets. I throw them away almost.
Gosh.
I almost always just get rid of
when
them.
do we get past those as a society?
It's annoying. I don't.
I guess the one thing about a book jacket I like is if I don't have a bookmark, I can use that as the bookmark. Is that even maybe that's the intention of it?
I don't know. It just gets in the way, and I usually get rid of it.
You'll get rid of it even if beneath the book jacket there's just a blank cover page?
Usually.
I
mean, if it's a really cool cover, hold on. I mean, but I never will keep it on when I'm reading it.
When you're reading
Always take it off.
Yeah.
Just throw it on the floor.
Disdainfully. I was wondering where you put it. It's like you just put the book jacket on your bookshelf.
No, I treat it very disrespectfully.
I don't blame you. Okay, so fascinating stuff about your book, fascinating stuff about this book, about the inner workings of New York City, the works, Anatomy of a City. What else do you have here in your pile that you brought?
I do have this Seinfeld book. This is a book, as you can see, is from the Goodwill.
Okay,
$4.
$3.99. Was it on a Greene sale day?
I don't know. It's just on the shelves. I don't know if it was a special day or anything, but it's $4. I'll go for that.
Okay.
But I'm a huge Seinfeld fan. I just think I really respond to like his precision is what I like. And just to see this book essentially is all of his routines from like the 1980s until the 2010s, just like listed out. And it's sort of presented in a really interesting way. Like if you see the way he writes out the jokes, it's kind of like each line is kind of separated from the other.
Yeah.
So it's not like paragraphs. It's less like joke. And each one is very meticulously laid out. And I kind of respond to people who like take it. He's almost like a watchmaker or something.
Right.
Like it's very precise.
Craftsmanship.
Yeah.
Have you done like live comedy?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't have any interest in doing that.
Yeah.
No, it's just not for me. Even like running around doing like promotion for the book and stuff that's a new phase for me. I'm very much like a background.
Yeah.
That's where I like to be. But yeah, it's I always love the show, of course, and
Yeah.
but he's just like I really jive with his sort of philosophy about how he approaches these things.
You do?
Yeah.
That's cool. I always feel like Seinfeld is like, okay, this is what happens when humans' basic needs have been met. Where does the existential misery begin?
Right.
And I think it begins at all the little Seinfeld things.
Yeah. I like that he is 100% purely doing his own thing. Like he's not trying to shift it in any way. Like this is what he's interested in, and he just like laser focuses on it and then works as hard as a person could ever work and just has the ridiculously high skill set of it. And he's a guy, when you read it, you like know that he like will sweat like a comma, like where the comma is or something.
Right.
Like it's not arbitrary. He's put so much thought into like every like bit of it.
Right.
So, when I'm writing, I try to use that and just trim every ounce of fat. There's like not one like wasted word in this entire book.
Yeah.
It's really, really impressive.
It is impressive. Seeing live comedy and seeing people, because I've done it off and on over the years, and seeing how I started versus, who I started with and all these things. And it almost just feels like, can you chisel this piece of marble down to like just who you are, and then who you are at your best, most precise. Yeah. I saw Bill Burr the other night at the Comedy Store, and it just feels like he's talking to you, but everything embedded within what he's saying has purpose, and it's funny, and the mastery of that, you don't even see it. Yeah. There's no seams.
Yeah, it's very hard to get to that place where you're that good that you can now like just hone in on the exact right thing, and it takes a lot of time. I mean, when I first started writing comedy, I was like, my sort of ambitions for it were way higher than like my skill set to be able to execute it. And then you get really frustrated because you're like, I know what I want to be doing, but I'm just like not there yet. I can't reach those heights. But then, as you do it longer, you just learn more and you pick up other skills. And I've been lucky enough to be in some of like the best rooms ever. Like, my first writing room was The Onion. And then I was on a show called The President's Show, which had a lot of amazing people there. And, then my next job was Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. So I'm with like Tina Fey and Robert Carlock and those guys. And, I'm just like soaking all this stuff like a sponge, and I'm just like working the whole time. And I could feel myself like getting better because I was around people that were like exponentially better than I was.
Right.
But if you're paying attention and you're like listening, you can soak up a lot.
Like people like Tina Fey, do those people do they all work differently, or are these people able to come up with answers in the room, or are they just able to pose the right questions and then go away and come up with solutions to story problems or jokes or
I mean, their like speed of being able to fix problems is like way faster than mine was. That's for sure. It's just like, I mean, Robert Carlock in particular is like one of the most brilliant people ever. Like his skill set is ridiculous. Like the level of jokes that he's able to come up with is so fast.
Wow.
And he's just a very, very smart guy. And, so he's just like his brain is like a supercomputer that's like working on all these problems. And
what's he written on? Because I'm not super familiar with his name.
Well, basically, Robert Carlock is Tina Fey's sort of, partner.
Got it. Okay.
So all the thing, like with 30 Rock, they created that together.
Okay.
They met each other on Saturday Night Live.
Okay.
And then when she sold the show, she brought him over. And I mean, Tina's sort of the person but Robert is also like people who are in the writers community. They're like, oh, we know that guy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not somebody who's widely known like in the public, I don't think. But, you see people like that and you're like, their speed of being able to fix problems and stuff is ridiculous.
So that is a thing there. It's the speed in which they compute.
I mean, they don't always solve everything immediately, but they solve it way faster than you would.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, I was hoping you'd give a different answer because I wanted it to be like, oh yeah, no, they go away, they walk around, they drink too much coffee. It's like I was just hoping it mirrored my own failed approach.
I mean, it's not always that they solve every problem instantaneously, but it's just. When you've done a show like 30 Rock for all these years, like you learned so many things. I mean, they cranked out a bunch of episodes of that, and they were the ones putting everything together, and they, their level of understanding about this stuff just gets higher and higher.
That's so cool. So the fact that you've been involved in those processes. When you wrote for The Onion, were they still printing it out, or was it past that time?
They were still printing it out. At the time, yeah. I caught the last 2 years of the paper.
Yeah, because I remember seeing it at the newspaper stands, and I actually had no preconceived. I had no understanding of what it was, so I just picked it up one day, and so what a cool gift that was. I was just like, oh my God, this is so funny. What is this? I just found it, at a newsstand, and it was a free newsstand, and
yeah. No, I missed the physical paper. Obviously.
Right.
I've made my thoughts about physical media very clear, but it's so great. I would grab it and just go on the subway and just laugh on there and make a fool of myself.
Yeah, I would ride the bus back then too, and in LA actually, and so you had all kinds of time to sit at the bus stop waiting, and those Onions got me through it at times. It was like in high school, I knew nothing about Lord of the Rings. We were just bored one weekend, and so my brother and I went and saw Lord of the Rings, and we were just like, oh my God. Like, with no notion of what it was like astounding to us.
Sure, it doesn't take long to hook you.
No.
2 minutes in, you're like, this is the best movie I've ever seen.
The best movie I've ever seen. Yeah. And then I was like at the midnight screenings for the next two that came out. I was like, oh, I'm so in. Okay, so Seinfeld. Well, that's an interesting one because he is a divisive, I think I fall under the camp of Larry David. I like Larry. Does Seinfeld send Larry flowers every week just thanking him for how much he did?
I mean, look, they're both great, but I think whenever there's a creative partnership, it's always everybody wants to give credit to the one person and be like, they're the real star and the other guy sucks. And it's just it's
a marriage.
Nobody that good would pair with somebody who sucks. It's just nobody would do that.
Yes.
You hear that sometimes with Chappelle and Neil Brennan, for the Chappelle show era, they're like, well, Neil Brennan was the real writer and Chappelle was just lucky or whatever, one way or the other. I'm just I just don't buy that.
Right.
I mean, these types of partnerships always, it's two incredibly talented people get together and they have different skill sets, but
there's a mutual IQ, a mutual compatibility.
I think so. I think it's one of those things where people want to
divide
and conquer everything. It's Larry was the man.
Right.
Jerry stunk. I'm
I know.
Come on now.
It's so easy to do it. It's so easy, and I'm trying to avoid that way of thinking. Hey, what's your favorite? What's your, it's why do we have to pinpoint things?
To me, that's very internet style.
That's right. It's a BuzzFeed list way of thinking.
I need to know who's number one.
Right.
It's it doesn't really matter. They're all great. It's good.
That's right. It happens with basketball all the time. Who's your Mount Rushmore? It's just appreciate.
Well, with basketball, I mean, that's legitimately an actual sport where there is a winner and a loser.
All right, so who's your Mount Rushmore in basketball while we're on the subject?
I don't know. I don't watch basketball. But I'm aware that there's winners and losers in it.
Yeah. Well, I think we also totally overvalue the winners in society. It's you can't be a winner unless you had a good adversary to lose. And right. I think we're so win obsessed in our society that we forget, the whole thing is you millennials and your participation trophies. I remember being really stoked to get that participation trophy.
Showed up,
felt
took
good.
a shower that morning. You got that,
it felt, and you know what? You were helping those 2 or 3 kids who went on to be good athletes realize themselves. And that's, to me, it's something.
Just holding the bench down. I want to make sure it doesn't float
that's
away.
Right.
Somebody needs to be there.
When they needed their Gatorade, they got it. And we hydrated them all the way through Little League.
I don't know. The participation trophy stuff is, people get so worked up about that. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Is it really? I don't know.
No. There was just a moment where they were, all these little divide and conquer tactics that get thrown out there through the media.
Now, if a kid didn't show up and still got one, then I'd be pissed off.
Yeah, that's right. You
shouldn't
get a participation
I didn't see you, and
trophy.
why am I giving you that?
As one who participated at a low level,
yeah.
I resent you getting this trophy. Oh, yeah, you could totally stratify it further.
I would take it. I would take it from them.
Yeah, that's right. When you're ready to participate, you can have this back. So we got Seinfeld down. I can see peeking out at the bottom of the pile.
Yes.
The final book you brought.
Yes, this is 48 Laws of Power. This is a book that I came across. I'm not sure where I found it, but it came at exactly the right time, actually. Because I used to be a teacher before I got into comedy.
Oh,
writing.
really?
Yeah, I was an ESL teacher. And so I was making a shift because I wanted to pursue The Onion. Like I was like, okay, I'm going to go to New York and see if I can make this happen. And it was around that time when I found this book, and it was sort of a life-changing book for me. I don't know if there's ever been a book that has like more like wisdom like packed into one book. It's really unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it just, because there are some things in here where this is actually kind of a bit of a divisive book. I know some people are like, oh, this is like sort of dark Machiavellian ideas of how to like get ahead and stuff. And, you know, some of it could be used that way. But also it's like, also you can identify people who are doing that stuff to you. It's just like, it can be like, you can use it or you can use it to sort of protect yourself. And because this author is a very interesting guy where he had been bouncing around a bunch of places, and he was just a really smart guy, but like he just knew there were all these sort of power games going on around him that he didn't really understand, and he was becoming like the victim of them.
Right.
You know, and so this was his way of sort of understanding the ways to operate in ways that will like protect you or help you move forward. Or they can be used in terrible ways too. Like if you want to be a Machiavellian psycho, there's probably things that could make you better at that too.
Like what are those things? Like, do you have any tips? Because I'm trying.
Trying to be a Machiavellian psycho?
Just keep ending up on the bus. I don't know. No, I mean, that is like we live in an economic transactional society, and there's psychology within that. And it bleeds into our personal interactions. And so it would make sense that like, it might help to like at least identify all these ways that we're interacting with people.
Yeah, and sort of helps you to sort of get to where you want to be. And you can do that without doing terrible things and hurting people and all that. Like I'm not wanting to do that, but I do want to try to figure out a pathway. You know, like when I showed up in New York, like I knew I had met this one guy who worked at The Onion, like because I decided to pursue it and I was sort of reaching out to people. And so, you know, I showed up and I didn't know anybody, and I'm like, well, it's not just going to happen. So I have to like figure out how to do this. So I really tried to strategize about like what's a pathway to figuring this out. And like one of the first things that I realized was that I had to expand my network in a massive way, because I didn't know anybody, and I literally know one guy. So it's like, what if he just loses interest in me, and then you have nothing? So this is one of the laws here. This is a beautifully designed book also, by the way. But one of the laws that I definitely used was court attention at all cost.
Court attention at all costs.
Yeah, I'll read that section.
Well, Evan finds that section. I'd like to remind everyone we're sponsored by Coca-Cola and Pepsi, the first podcast in the book market to pull off the best soft drink makers.
I don't know about the best. They're pretty good.
Coca-Cola and Pepsi, they're the best. Pick one. You won't regret it.
Okay, so law number 6, court attention at all costs. Everything is judged by its appearance. What is unseen counts for nothing. Never let yourself get lost in the crowd, then, or buried in oblivion. Stand out. Be conspicuous at all costs. Make yourself a magnet of attention by appearing larger, more colorful, more mysterious than the bland and timid masses. So there's a bad version of that, of course.
Right.
Peacocking around and acting like a douche. You know, that's not the way I applied that. Like, sort of my philosophy was I needed to expand my network. And so what happened was there was I started working with Mad Magazine at one point, and they asked me if I knew any other contributors that, you know, they were trying to get some new people in the mix. And so I was like, oh yeah, I know some people. And so I invited a couple of people to the office, and unbeknownst to me, there was another guy who they also had asked to do the same. Like, so he had brought a couple of people. So these were all people from different spheres of like the comedy world. And so we were all sitting in a conference room, and we're all just hanging out, talking, and it was like super fertile and interesting, because it's like, oh, this is a guy from the New Yorker, there's a guy from the Onion, there's a guy who works over at the Tonight Show, and all of us were in a room, and all those people were sort of siloed. You don't necessarily run into those people ordinarily, so it just felt very exciting and interesting. And so me and that other guy, after that meeting, we got to talking, and we were like, that was really cool. Like, maybe we should try to engineer that situation like again. And so what we ended up doing was we would have like a sort of a writer's party a writer's dinner every month, where we'd get together. Like, it would be us and then 4 other writers who were doing interesting stuff in the city. So we'd all just like eat dinner and hang out and get to know each other and just talk about our respective situations. And it just was like very fun and interesting. And right off the bat, like, okay, now there's like 4 other interesting people in comedy that I know now. And so we would do that every month. So we did that every month for probably about 6 months. And all of a sudden, you know, each time my network is sort of expanding. And you know, when you're bringing people in this, you're not bringing them in. It's not like a spider web or something where you're like, I got you and now you're going to like do some shit for me. It's just like, I just want to get to know you and just hang out. Then eventually we were like, maybe we could like supersize this idea and do like a full-fledged party, you know? So we did that. And yeah, we rented out a space in the Strand. I don't know if you know the Strand bookstore.
Oh, yeah.
In New York City. They have a rare book room on the top floor.
Right.
And so we sort of rented that out, and we were just like, all right, we're going to like blow this up and make just a bigger version of that dinner. And it went really well. Like it was very meticulously thought out. Like, who do we want to be in the mix? Like, we just want this person and this person. And we were like, don't bring your spouse or your girlfriend. We don't want them there. Like, not that they're not lovely people, but we just want every single person that you would meet in the room to, like, you'd bump into them and they'd be doing something cool, and you bump into them and they'd be doing something cool.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there were a couple of benefits to that. Like, one, obviously you're expanding your network. The second is that you're finding out all the information about what's going on in the city, like in the writing community. Like, all of a sudden I knew all these things that were happening. Like, when a show would be hiring, I would know about it because I knew a guy from that. And also it just sort of puts you on the map. People are all of a sudden like, who's this guy throwing this party and what is this all about? And also it allows you to reach out to people that you just want to talk to, you know, like, oh, there's a guy, and now you have a reason and you're offering something. You're not just like, hey, just do some stuff for me. Instead, it's like, hey, there's this cool event with a bunch of interesting writers. Would you like to come? And some people would want to come. And even if they couldn't make it, now all of a sudden you've established a relationship with them. So that sort of was the application of that sort of concept.
I mean,
it came directly from this.
That's a mass application. You actually put it into real human connection. Like, that's.
Yeah. I mean, I tried. I mean, it just felt like it kind of came about organically because of that meeting happened to happen. But like, I was reading this book at that time, and it sort of was like, I sort of made the connection that like maybe there's a way to engineer that sort of situation.
That's huge. I mean, you expanded your network from 1 to dozens.
Yeah.
And just network is in, people you get to share information with.
And it's like, you can network in a way that's not gross too.
Right.
There's a gross version of it.
Well, you're interested in people who are doing things that you're interested in, and vice versa, right?
Yeah. And you know, you get to know them, and these were like my idols. These were the people that were doing exactly what I wanted to be doing. And so I just picked their brain, and I think people can tell when you're like legitimately interested in them, as opposed to like a cynical kind of like, what can you do for me kind of a deal. And also the philosophy is like a rising tide lifts all boats kind of a thing.
Yeah.
It's not like that guy gets a job and now he's taking it from me.
Yeah,
you're
like, building a community.
Yeah, like I think that's a very short-sighted way to look at things. It's like, you know, a win for them is a loss for me.
Right.
It's like these people, like if they get a job in some cool space, like all of a sudden, like now I know a guy who works there and maybe they put me in the mix. And most of the jobs I've gotten have been some form of that.
That's so cool.
You know, like people that I met at that party, like 10 years later, you know, something interesting happens.
That's so
it's
cool.
Like you can't engineer how it's going to happen or what's going to happen, but you just know something positive will come of it.
I mean, even if you never get the job, you could always interview the ones who did on your podcast 10 years later, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, you just never know.
Well, that's a good thing about a podcast. You can bring on people that you're interested in, and now you have a reason to say, hey, what's going on?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, that didn't even click for me, and now it does. You want to get some coffee? No.
Yeah, it's like there's a way to do it that's totally fine and not shady. It's like, it's fine.
You reading that law of power, like the court attention, it really is interesting because like you grow up watching these movies, especially if you're like an introverted type and you're like, you see the person at the party and they're just the wallflower, and then like the other wallflower finds them and they have their romance, and it's like that doesn't happen in real life.
No,
you have to like go say hi to people.
Yeah,
or you have to engage.
Yeah.
I mean, once in a while, sure, it'll happen, but the odds get a lot better when you do reach out.
Absolutely.
And even especially in environments where you're not comfortable, and that doesn't come easy to a lot of us. So a book like this helps you, like you said, it helped you draw that connection at a time when it was making sense in your life, and how cool that it did.
Yeah, and look, I can be that wallflower. Like, that's sort of my natural state, is like sort of being, a watcher as opposed to a participator or whatever.
Yeah.
But, that's changed somewhat over time, like just because I knew that wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
And also, when I was an ESL teacher, my job would be kind of to bounce around classrooms and kind of, it was like the prototype of this idea of like a web.
Right.
Like, where like something, happens in this one classroom, I'm like, well, maybe that might benefit them over there. There's a kid here who's struggling with the same thing. And so you can take that idea to the other person.
And where was that, where you were the ESL teacher?
I mean, I worked in New Jersey for 2 years in Trenton.
Yeah.
And I went overseas, actually. I was working in China for almost 5 school years.
No kidding.
And so that's where I was right before
You made the New York move.
Yes.
Wow.
And probably, I was as far away from the comedy community as you can possibly be, like geographically and, philosophically, And so I knew that a plan was like required.
Yeah.
So I was reaching out to people on Facebook, and I had like a VPN. I don't know if you know a VPN.
Oh, yes.
Like a third party site that masks your site that you're actually on, because Facebook, we couldn't even access it in China at the time. So I had to kind of mask what I was doing a little bit, and that's like when I left that job, I had to quit in December because they need time. It's an international school, so I quit in December, but then you keep working until June at the end of the school year.
Yeah.
So I had like a 7-month window where I knew like what I was going to be trying to do, but I wasn't there yet. So that was a period where I was really like strategizing and trying to figure out how that would work.
And it seems like you made it work, and I think that's pretty inspiring for people listening to this to see that, it really is possible. Whatever you want to do, if you build the plan and you take the steps, and it's cool to see that you have, and that you've come here with stories that inspired that, and then a story you actually wrote, and that you wrote in a period of time where you could have very easily gone inward, and instead you went inward and you came out with something that you're going to be sharing with the world in April.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited. It's just like, this is, sometimes you're tackling things where like you don't even know if you're capable of doing it until you're sort of like on the hook to do it, and then you just try to figure it out. And
that's the good stuff.
Yeah, it can be daunting if you think about like the enormity of it. When I was approaching this, I wasn't like, I tried to scale it back and be like, I'm not writing a book, I'm writing like a page.
Right.
I have to come up with this funny section, and then you look at it at the end of the month and it's stacked up, and now it's a chapter.
Brick by brick.
And because when I would sort of zoom out and be like, oh no, I got to write a whole book, it's a paralyzing kind of situation.
Yeah. Well, you made it through, and I know that I want to read it, and I'm certainly fascinated by the subject matter and how you approached it. And I really appreciate you coming in here today and talking through all these stories with me. Yeah,
and thank you for having me. I definitely appreciate that. I like talking about books. It's a very interesting subject. So when you came to me with this, I was like, yeah, that sounds great.
Yes, good. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. There's not much else I really want to talk about.
Maybe I'll see you at one of those book sales.
Yeah, that's right. I got to get the link from you. Okay, Life Wants You Dead, Evan Waite. Thank you so much for joining us on the Turek Books podcast. Thank you for listening to another episode of Turek Books. Be sure to like, subscribe, thumbs up, any kind of thing that could help us get listened to or watched by more people. We really appreciated having you, and hope to see you again next week with a new guest and plenty of books. Take care until then.